Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com and to my Linux week. Yes, as a tried and tested Windows user, I'm going to spend the next 7 days only using Linux. Now, some of the time I will use my trusted Android tablet because Android is based on Linux, but most of the time on my desktop and laptop computers, I'm going to be using Linux Mint. So let's get on with my video diary. Greetings! It's now just before lunchtime on Saturday the 20th of August. I'm having a fairly easy day today and my computing will be taking place, I think, all on my Acer Aspire 1 netbook. And if you saw my last video, you'll know that in that video I created a bootable Linux Mint USB drive. There it is, a tiny little drive, you can just about see it there, and that allows me to run the Linux Mint desktop on this computer. So what I'm going to do today is just a bit of sorting out on the desktop. You might remember last time I went down to the equivalent of a taskbar in Windows and right-clicked and altered the panel settings to make it a bit deeper, to make the icons a bit easier to see. Going to make it even higher this time, I think right the way up to there, that's nice. I'd also like to make my fonts a bit bigger. This is partially so I can see them, partially so you can see them properly on video. So I'll go to the menu and I'll go to System Settings, the little gear icon there. And I'm going to go, I'm sure you've guessed, to fonts. Lots of good font control here in Linux Mint Cinnamon. And I think I'll change the text scaling factor, say 1.2. That's a little bit bigger. And that should have made the menu look a bit bigger. That's better. I'd like to also change a few other fonts. So for example, if I look at the terminal, just to give me a program running with a menu. That menu I think is a little bit small, I think, for me, so I'm going to change the default font to up to 12 there, and that should make our menu a lot bigger. That's actually much better. I'll just twiddle a couple of other fonts. And there we are, I'm now happy with the fonts. And you'll also see we've got very good control here of anti-aliasing. We can select that, and we can select the hinting of the text, which again affects how it is rendered on the screen. Lots of options there. We'll leave it at slight. I can't really show you that in video because the video compression destroys the effect, but it's good to see you've got all that control available. I'd also like to deal with which fonts are installed on my system, and for that I'm going to plug in a USB drive. There we are, and it should come up. There it is, nice little noise. If I open up that, it's opened it directly, that's handy. And if we scroll down here, I've got a document which I prepared earlier before I started this Linux Week experiment. This is a standard sort of Windows document, and it's showing you a document which has got some standard Windows fonts in things like Verdana and Comic Sans. If I go to say Comic Sans there, you'll note that it's showing it in italics here because the font is not available on the system. If I show you a shot of this in Windows, in Word, you'll see the fonts look very different because they are installed on that system. We come back to Linux, they aren't there. So I need to make sure those fonts are available so I can use them in my documents, so my documents work exactly the same as I transition over to Linux. So I'll close that down a second. Now, there's various ways you can do this. There are commands you can run in the terminal to install certain Windows fonts. But there are two problems with that approach. One is it won't work on the system running from a USB drive as we got here. That's fairly fundamental. And secondly, it doesn't bring all the Windows fonts across, just certain ones. So what I did before I went into this again was I went into Windows, I went into C, Windows, I scrolled down to find the font directory, and I took a copy of the fonts directory and I copied it over to my USB drive. And now here back in Linux, you see we've got that directory, and I can click on fonts and open it up, and this has got all the fonts that are on my Windows system. And you can see they appear in various formats as font files there, but you can also see the actual fonts on the screen. So for example, if I scroll down enough and get to the right point and learn my alphabet properly, I should be able to find Comic Sans, which was one of the ones that we couldn't actually see before. There it is, look. So I could install that version of Comic Sans just by opening it up there and pressing install. Now, some people can say this will take a little while, it will, but it does mean you've got absolute control over what is installed and what isn't. Things are whizzing away here, and hopefully in a second it'll show that font is installed. Now, to make this fully work, I've now got to install all the versions of Comic, not just the standard version with the bold, etc. So I'll get on with that for a second. And there we are. I haven't done all the fonts here, but I've done the ones I know I want to use. I can always come back to fonts later on. And in theory, if I open up Transcend again, I go back down to my document, open up my Windows test document. We particularly would see Comic Sans would be different. Is it going to work? Yes, you can now see Comic Sans is there on the system. It's coming up as a font there, not a font that isn't installed. So that's working very well. So I've done some useful setup there for continuing my Linux experiments. Right, it's now Sunday the 21st of August, and here we are back on the Linux Mint desktop. And as you can probably see, I've been adding icons for things like LibreOffice Calc and Writer and GIMP to my desktop so I can get to them more easily. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to install Google Chrome. So I like to have different browsers available. I've already got Firefox, and in fact I'll go into a Firefox page here, and this is the page for Google Chrome. Now, there's various ways you can install things in Linux. Here I'm going to use a simple way for Google Chrome, which is to go to the relevant web page, which is google.com Chrome, and I'm going to click Download Now. And there we are, it's picked up. We need to get a version for Linux, and we have to accept the license as you would expect. And there we are, we'll use all the defaults. This should be straightforward. OK. And there we are, it's downloaded the files, it's in the package installer. I can just click Install Package now. And there we are, it seems to have finished. That seems to be pretty good. If we close that as well, we should now find we have Google Chrome on this machine. So if I go to the menu here, and we go to Internet, yes, Google Chrome is there, look, and I can do a right click and add to desktop, just because I want it on my desktop. It seems to be good at dropping packages on top of other packages on the desktop, but never mind. Let's put it there. Come on, drag along, we want you over there. That's good. And hopefully now we can launch Google Chrome, making things feel a bit more familiar on our Linux Mint desktop. And here we are. Like all new browsers, really wants to do lots of things that we don't want to do. But I want to go to YouTube. YouTube.com. Because of course this is a Sunday afternoon, it's about 2:30, and therefore exciting things have happened. The latest Explaining Computers video will have gone live. So let's go to sign in. Hopefully Google's messages will go away eventually. I think I'll also just zoom up a bit so we can actually see what on earth is going on. Why is everything so small these days, or is it my eyes? And after a lot of messing around that obviously I can't show you, I finally arrived in my YouTube control panel, YouTube Creator Studio, and I can see that indeed my latest video has gone live, the Latte Panda vs Raspberry Pi 3, and already 623 of you have watched it in the first 37 minutes. That's nice. And next week's video is still waiting to go up, which will be the one before this one. It gets very confusing time, doesn't it? And as I always do on a Sunday at this time, the key thing I do is to go into Analytics. And we can see if things are working okay. Oh, that's doing rather nicely, yes. Those videos up there, yes, people are watching it. 830 views coming through. And the last Latte Panda video, which is just going bonkers, is sitting there. So, I've got things to do. I'm sure I've got comments to answer because people will have been making comments on the videos, because that's what you all do. So I must go and answer these comments, and I will speak to you again about more Linuxy stuff tomorrow. Greetings! How are you lot? Very good. It's now Monday the 22nd of August. I almost forgot to talk to you today. I've been doing a lot of Linuxing, but it's all been writing in a Google Docs here on my i3, which is running the same USB drive version of Linux I've had previously. And it's running Google Docs, so you might just about see it on screen there. I can't actually record this screen for you because of the resolution, But if I show you back what it would look like on my netbook, you can see Google Docs works very nicely on Linux in Google Chrome, as we would expect. And I've been using it, as I often do, in combination with my Android tablet, also running Google Docs, so I can run multiple documents across multiple screens, go back and forth, and also type with the on-screen keyboard here if I want, as well. A very nice lean forward, lean back solution. Now, not a lot to say about Linux today, other than the fact it's been working very well. But I note a couple of things. The first one is I discovered my keyboard configuration wasn't right. We didn't go through a setup process when we created the USB drive, so if you're not in the US, you might find your keyboard needs changing. And to do that, I went into Settings, I scrolled down to Keyboard, I then selected Layouts, and I went to Add a Layout by clicking the plus button at the bottom. I searched for English UK, eventually found that then appeared in my list. I then deleted English US, and then my keyboard worked properly, so you might have to do that. The other thing I'd note today is I had to get my printer working to do a printout. I thought it might take a bit of time. It was very easy. All I had to do was to turn the printer on, and as soon as I turned it on, Linux Mint detected the thing, set everything up, I could print straight away. So I was really very impressed with that. So this is it for today. Fairly simple thing. Tomorrow I'm going to try installing Linux Mint directly onto the hard drive, or at least the SSD, of my test rig computer. Right, it's now a Tuesday evening and I've dragged out my test rig, which I used in a lot of my videos, normally running Windows 10. But what I'm going to try and do this evening, is to install Linux Mint on this machine. Now, as you may remember, this machine was built with a caddy system, so I can go to the front of it and remove the Windows 10 system drive, which is an SSD, and I can put in this old Seagate 500GB drive I've got lying around, and the plan is to install Linux Mint on that. So what I'm going to do is to boot the system up via the USB drive I've been using all week and hopefully install Linux Mint. Right, I'm back again, a few seconds for you, a couple of hours for me. To say I'm not that happy with Linux right now is to put things mildly. Anyway, what has been going on is I found I couldn't actually boot from the USB drive on this particular machine. That wasn't Linux's fault. So what I did is I actually created a DVD of the Linux Mint image, and I booted to that, and here we are. The thing that's been driving me bonkers is to actually get the display set up on this machine correctly so I could record it, and Linux does not give you a lot of control of that. You can't go in and set your resolution and your refresh rate yourself. It has to detect it for you, and it doesn't get it right. The number of wires and bits of electronics here to make this work is staggering. The other problem I've had is actually reading the drive, which I'm going to put Linux onto. If we go into computer here, I can finally see it. This is a drive which is not formatted. The drive I gave it was a freshly formatted drive, and we put it in formatted NTFS and it refused to see it. So I've had to go through the whole process twice. Anyway, I am now hoping we are at roughly where we would be at if we booted from the USB drive and we wanted to install Linux on the system. All week I've been looking at this little icon saying install Linux Mint. I don't know if this will work. Let's see if it will. It depends if it'll read that drive. So I'll click on it. You may hear a DVD drive boot up in the background, because, or at least come to life in the background, because that's where Linux is running from. And here we are. It's, in theory, going to install Linux on this system. There we are. We'll do it in English and we'll continue. This will be the moment of truth. Install third-party software for that. I think we'll do that. That's fine. Continue. This computer has currently no detected operating systems. What would you like to do? Erase disk and install Linux Mint. That's exactly what I'd like to do. Do I want to do this? I do indeed, yes. So what you're seeing here is what would happen if you bought a brand new hard drive and you booted off either a DVD or a USB key and you were going to install Linux Mint. So that's what's going on right now. Just picking the basic options. My name. Does it want to know my name? It does. All right then. Barnett. Pick a username. CJB. Oh, it must start lowercase. Isn't that lovely? I do not require my password at login. I'm going to log in automatically. Do I have to have a password? Oh look, and as it installed, it's going to tell us all about Linux Mint. We know that already. We'll just skip through this in fast computer time. And there we are. It seems to be that everything is ready. So I can now do a restart. I have no idea what will happen here in terms of recording. Probably things will get rather bad. But it seems in about 12 minutes there we have installed Linux Mint. So I'll press restart now. And here we are, booting back up again, booting hopefully back into Linux from the hard drive on the machine, or from an installed operating system this time. And we've arrived back on the desktop. Linux still has not impressed me greatly with the ability to control how it talks to a display through a field recorder, but admittedly that's probably not something most people want to do. Anyway, we should have now a much more responsive Linux system because of course it's running from a hard drive. So I'll do, for example, I don't know, I'll launch GIMP. It should come up much faster than it would have done running from a USB drive. I think it's going to, or fairly fast anyway. Yes, that seems to work. That's pretty good. So that means I've got more opportunities set up for experimenting. And tomorrow, I think I'll try and do some work in GIMP. Right, well now it's a Wednesday the 22nd of August. It even says that on the screen. I've adjusted it to say that. And I've continued to use Linux fairly happily this morning. I've been doing some writing, I've been checking up on the news, and of course checking up on how my videos are doing. Have to do that all the time. Must keep track of your YouTube numbers. Anyway, one thing I wanted to do today to try and prove you could do more complicated things in Linux was I wanted to do some work on my business cards, which I've got in this folder here. I need to get my cards reprinted because I've almost run out of them, so I was going to make a few changes. I thought, I know, I can do that in GIMP. The card is a two-sided thing. It's got a back that looks a bit like this at the moment, although I want to change that, and it's got a front that looks a bit like this. And I wanted to change a few of the details on the back, change the picture, change the front, etc. It's done in Photoshop, in layers, which is a bit unusual for a card, but actually, because it's got a lot of graphics in, that seemed the best way to do it, and it's the way it has been done. So I thought, that's not a problem. All I've got to do is to open it up, and it'll go into GIMP, and so I launched GIMP like that early on today, and it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is I'd forgotten that GIMP, while it's a fantastic photo editor, it's a great Photoshop clone, it doesn't handle CMYK images. In other words, it doesn't handle images in the format you'd use for professional print work. And therefore, I was stuck. I can't do that. I've looked around for plugins and things for GIMP. Can I actually handle CMYK? There are some conversion systems, but there's nothing which will allow me to bring in a multi-layer document, work on it, save it back in the same format, and export for print. So sadly, that's a fail for Linux today. I'll continue to look around for stuff like that. Tomorrow, I should be okay doing some graphics work. I'm going to do some stuff in Inkscape to produce a diagram for the book I'm currently writing. But for today, unfortunately, I've hit a little bit of a barrier where Linux has, for now, failed to deliver. Greetings! It's now Thursday the 25th of August, sometime in the afternoon, and the first thing to say today is that Linux is 25 years old today, so happy birthday to Linux having reached its quarter century. Now, what I'm going to do this time around is I'm going to install the software package Inkscape on this machine so I can do a bit of graphics work. So to do that, I'm going to go to a terminal, and I'm going to first of all type the command sudo apt get update. Now, just to say what that does, sudo stands for super user do. It means we're activating a command in what's called root mode, a bit like administrator mode in Windows. It means it's got full access, full privileges to do things on the machine. Apt get update, what that does, I'll start it off, it'll take a little second. What that does is update the package lists from the repositories out there on the web where you can get new Linux software from. So it doesn't actually install anything, it doesn't update anything, but it means when we ask the machine to actually install something, it'll find the right files to do that with. So we've done that. I'm now going to install Inkscape. So for that I'll do a sudo apt get and install, I can type it right, and Inkscape. And if I do that, hopefully, that'll also run through. Do I wish to continue? I certainly do. And hopefully it'll get installed. And there we are, it's been installed. And if we're lucky, we can now look in the menu. And if we look under graphics, we've got Inkscape. Hurrah, it's working. Isn't Linux wonderful? Of course it is. And there we are. So I'm now going to use this package to do a bit of a structured graphics and illustration for the book I'm currently writing away on. I'm not quite sure I'm going to do that today, but I'll come back to you when I'm doing it, or indeed when I've done it. So here I am back again, just about finishing off my diagram. Just wanted to do another one little label, paste in place, move that across over there, that fits over here, and I think we just need to alter the text there. Technology improves quickly. There we are. So I've drawn the diagram I needed to draw. A very simple diagram. I've been meaning to draw this one for a long while. Haven't got around to drawing it, but there we are. We've done it, and I must of course press save. One thing I would note though, I'm using this package rather than Adobe Illustrator. I actually started off by bringing in a diagram I'd done previously, totally different type of diagram, but I just wanted to make sure I matched the styles and the fonts and things to a certain extent anyway. And I found it doesn't bring things in absolutely perfectly. If I click on this, you will see that's brought up text as if all four of those text labels are the same piece of text. And then for some reason, that one's separate. Whereas actually, these should be 5 separate and freely positionable text labels. And of course, as you can see there, they aren't. And I also haven't got exactly the right font match between these anyway. So yes, things have worked. It's come in. In theory, I could go and change that so I haven't got the bold on it, but I could make that just italic. And except I can't, because italic doesn't exist on that list for that font as it's come across. And yes, I have installed the right fonts. Myriad Pro is the font here, so it hasn't absolutely matched. So has this worked? Yes. Could I draw diagrams in Inkscape on Linux and use it? I could, but there are still issues, and this isn't necessarily a Linux issue, it isn't even an Inkscape issue, but it's an issue of compatibility between working in Adobe Illustrator on Windows and working in Inkscape on Linux. And the two, they are comparable. This certainly is usable professionally, but in terms of going back and forth between a Windows and a Linux environment, there are still issues, I'm afraid. Greetings! Here I am again. It's now Friday, the final day of my Linux Mint week, and once again I'm writing on my netbook in Google Chrome in Google Docs. As you probably gathered, I've been writing a lot this week. I'm trying to progress from here we are, the first edition of my 3D printing book there, which was just called 3D Printing, to the second edition of my 3D printing book, which was called 3D Printing Second Edition. Guess what the book I'm writing is called? Yes, it's 3D Printing Third Edition. What will the next one be called in 2 years' time? I have no idea. Anyway, the fact I've been writing this week is significant. I chose this week for my Linux week very deliberately because I knew I wouldn't be doing much other than writing on a computer, and also obviously web-related stuff, bit of spreadsheets, that type of thing, a bit of graphics as you've seen, some of which worked, some of which didn't. But what I've not tried to do this week is video editing, audio editing, 3D modeling. It is possible to do all of those things in Linux, and there's been various debates on this channel in the comments about how well you can do that. I'm going to try that out, but not in this video. In future videos, I'll look in particular at video and audio editing on Linux. But for now, I'm very pleased with the fact that I've progressed to, as you can see, to a chapter 4 of the book. I was on chapter 3 when I started this week, so I have progressed using this system. I will look back when I look at this book and go, yes, I wrote a chapter of that in Linux. That was an interesting experiment to do. But anyway, I think for now I'm going to pass over to myself for my concluding comments. So here we are at the end of my Linux week, and indeed the end of my longest ever explaining computers video. Congratulations if you've made it here to the end. So, what have I learnt in the past 7 days? Well, for a start, I've learnt I actually rather like using Linux Mint with its Cinnamon desktop. It's a very relaxed, very fluid, very sort of cohesive form of computing. And for things like word processing, using spreadsheets, accessing email, the web, playing back media and stuff, it works very well indeed. I could easily transition to using Linux Mint or maybe another form of Linux in that sort of capacity. And in fact, I'm really seriously thinking now of moving my netbook over to Linux Mint on a permanent basis, or at least doing a dual boot. And of course, if I do a dual boot, I'll make a video about setting that up. Having said that, other activities are clearly harder in Linux. Things like video editing, audio editing, I didn't even try. I pushed them over there. I will come back to those in future videos, as I've said. But even other applications, things like editing images and creating images, are not quite as straightforward when you move away from Windows and the might of the Adobe packages there. And therefore I think in a future video, I'm going to look at Wine, a system that allows you to run Windows applications on a Linux system. But now that's it for this video. Thanks for watching it all. If you've enjoyed it, please press the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.